us today. I know for many of you, it's your second morning this week spent with CDFA, so we greatly appreciate your time. Welcome to the Tax Credit and Community Economic Development Capacity Building Application webinar. I'm Melissa Latham. I'm the Director of Communications and Policy. Again, we appreciate your time and anticipate that this presentation, including time for questions, will run from now until about 11:30. We have a lot of information to share with you that we're excited to share with you today. And we're really focused on reviewing how you can anticipate working with CDFA as a potential applicant, giving you an overview of the 2024 application process, and then really diving in step by step in terms of how you would apply for the Community Economic Development Capacity Building Program or the tax credit program. And then we'll be discussing next steps that you can anticipate in the process. We are recording today's session, and we will share that along with presentation slides and relevant links following today's workshop. So you'll get that over email tomorrow. If you have questions, please use that Q&A box and post them there so that we can monitor throughout the presentation and ensure that we are answering your questions. And I'll just quickly start with some introductions and encourage you all to also introduce yourself, your organization you're representing today in the chat. I'm joined this morning by my colleagues, Katie Easterly Marte, CDFA's Executive Director, George Hunton, the Director of Tax Credits, and Scott Meslansky, our Director of Clean Energy Finance. So you'll be hearing from all four of us this morning as we discuss these two programs. So again, encourage you all, if you could take a moment to introduce yourself and the organization that you're here to represent this morning in the chat. That would be great. So just going to run through a couple of details that we did cover earlier this week, but just wanted to give you a quick reminder. CDFA does offer pre-application assistance. So on Monday, you'll be receiving instructions that kind of guide you step by step on how to schedule a pre-application meeting through our online platform. So that information will be forthcoming, and we hope that it will be an easy process for you if you're an interested applicant or have questions about our programs, for you to schedule that pre-application meeting to talk more specifically about your potential project and get guidance from CDFA staff on applying for these resources or any other resources that might be relevant to your potential project. A lot of the information that we're covering today, actually all of the information we're covering today, is available on CDFA's Resource Hub. So we definitely encourage you to take a look at our Resource Hub and use that as a reference point. All of our program and application guidance can be found there. And as we mentioned earlier this week, CDFA is really here for you throughout the life cycle of your project. So from concept initiation through implementation, we really want to be here to support you throughout and encourage conversations at any point in your project development with CDFA staff, so we can help guide you if our resources are a good fit, or if we know of any other resources that might be a good fit for your organization. Also, a reminder that CDFA offers grant writing assistance for both tax credit and capacity building applicants. So these resources are really focused on smaller organizations that might have limited capacity to develop an application, and it's up to $2,500 per applicant. We are accepting applications on a rolling basis from now until January 31st, 2024. If you have a grant writer that you're interested in working with, you can certainly work with them using these resources. Or if you need assistance in connecting with a potential consultant, we're happy to provide you a list of those who are available to help organizations with grant writing at this time. And additional information on grant writing is in our application and program guides. So those of you who are interested, we certainly encourage you to take a look. It's a simple application with a quick turnaround time on our side for approval, but we also would like to connect with you in advance. So if you're looking to access grant writing assistance, encourage you to schedule a pre-application meeting sooner on the earlier side in advance of January 31st, and indicate that when you're signing up for pre-app meeting that you're interested in grant writing assistance. So we can be sure to connect with you before that January 31st deadline and hopefully help you connect to a grant writer that can support you. We reviewed these definitions on Tuesday, but just a reminder that these are outlined within our application and program guides. You'll hear that a lot. And just to kind of provide an understanding of CDFA's approach to these terms as they are referenced throughout our applications. And we do ask you to answer questions, relevant to these terms. So community economic development, asset-based community development, and collaboration are key tenets of the tax credit and capacity building program. We also look to support applications that have really, or projects that have really engaged their local community and garnered that public support for advancing their project. And then the one that I want to spend a little bit more time on is the priority populations and priority areas definition. So you'll see here priority populations listed out in this definition are those that have been identified in a New Hampshire-based research document, the analysis of impediments to fair housing choice in New Hampshire. So that research identified these listed here as priority populations in New Hampshire. However, if you are serving a priority population that you don't see here in this definition, you're certainly welcome as an applicant to define that priority population within your application and provide supporting data that demonstrates why that might be a priority population that needs to be focused on. I'll also mention priority areas. We'll talk about data later on in our presentation, but these are places that have been identified as having high need. And that's based on our community progress indicators, which measure the socioeconomic well-being and community need at the municipal level throughout New Hampshire. But we'll get into data further on in our discussion. Also want to review our grants management system real briefly. We have a whole section on our resource hub that provides step-by-step instructions for how, for best practices, tips for using our grants management system. So just to provide you some additional details here, our grants management system is where all applications must be submitted. It's an online platform, and that application is really the first step in your engagement with CDFA. It's the official record of your project with our organization. So that's the beginning of how you'll engage with us in the application process is through that grants management system. If you're new and have not registered, we have specific step-by-step instructions for how you can register in our grants management system. You'll receive an email that confirms that your registration has been submitted, and it takes about 2 to 3 business days for CDFA to review that registration and approve it. So please know that once you've received that email confirmation, you can anticipate being approved in our system in about 2 to 3 business days. If you are already registered in our system, we encourage you to use your existing account. If you've forgotten your username and password, again, we have step-by-step instructions for how you can get either your username or password reset and sent to you again. So please reference those documents if you already have an existing account but need that username and password information. And we also, every individual that's going to be engaged in your grant application needs to be registered on our grants management system. So if you are working with a grant writer, they will need to register under their own business name, and then they'll fill out a form which will need to be reviewed and approved by CDFA, as well as the organization that they're working with to connect them to your grant application. So everyone who is working on your application must be registered under their own username and password in our grants management system. And then again, you'll begin your application on GMS and you'll either select the 2025 or 2026 investment tax credit application funding opportunity, or the Community Economic Development Capacity Building Program for state fiscal year 2025 tax credits. And again, we have step-by-step instructions for how to begin that application on our resource hub. Just to give you a couple of tips for using GMS, all application requirements are outlined in our application and program guides in Appendix A. So if you want to have an understanding of the documents and the questions, we certainly encourage you to follow along in Appendix A of those application and program guides this morning. And you can get started and get an understanding of what the application requirements are by referencing that appendix. We do encourage you to draft narrative responses in a separate Word document to help make sure that you're grammatically correct. And if you're collaborating on an application, it's easier to do so in a Word document. However, we do want to note that there are specific character counts for each of the narrative requirements, and the character counts in a Word document don't always match up with those in our grants management system. So sometimes things like commas or apostrophes or ampersands translate into more characters when you copy and paste them from your Word document into our grants management system. So just be cognizant of that. Give yourself a little bit of leeway in terms of ensuring that you maybe don't reach that maximum 2,000 character count in your Word document. And also when you're copying and pasting content from a Word document into the application components, double check that content after you save the application, because it may allow you to copy and paste more characters than is available in GMS. And after you save, it will cut you off at that 2,000 character limit. And again, as I mentioned, special characters don't always translate. And we've outlined these tips and information on meeting character counts in a reference document that we'll share a link to, but just something to be cognizant of. And also, please ensure, I know George mentioned this and he'll mention it again later on in this presentation, applications must be complete and submitted by 4 o'clock on March 8th. Our system will close down at 4 o'clock on the dot. And so if your application is not complete and submitted at that time, we cannot accept it. So please ensure that you give yourself room as a buffer to transfer all of the documents and narrative components into our grants management system. We don't encourage you to start that process the same day as the deadline. Please do so well in advance of March 8th to ensure that you have enough time to submit that application in advance of 4 o'clock. And now, unless there's any questions, I'm going to hand it over to George to walk you through the application process.
George, before that, if I could just jump in with one question, Melissa, about the grant writing assistance.
Yes.
There was a question: if our organization received a previous technical award for grant writing assistance, are we eligible for assistance for the tax credit program? And I think this is referring to, can you get assistance, grant writing assistance twice, but you might also want to answer, are you then, if you've gotten that before, are you eligible to apply for tax credits, either version of the tax credit? So.
Right. So I imagine that might be reference to maybe if they received assistance in our community center investment program or previously. I'd say let's have a conversation so that we can understand what the need is and be sure to meet that need. So I think that's definitely worth a one-on-one conversation in a pre-app meeting to discuss that organization's specific need.
Great, thanks.
All right, George, take it away.
Thank you, Melissa. Good morning, everyone, and I'm glad to see you all here. I was watching the names as they were coming on the chat and people introducing themselves, and I saw quite a few names I'm familiar with and quite a few new names as well. So I'd like to welcome you all here today. I hope you'll find this workshop that is very informative, and it will help you put together the best workshop, or not the best workshop, but the best application that you can. That's the goal here, is to give you that help and give you as much direction as possible before you get started. So in terms of moving along, first, I'd like to talk a little bit about the process and the timeline. The workshops, again, are being recorded. So if you want to review this after this workshop is done, you'll have the opportunity to do that again. You'll receive an email after the workshop as to how you can access this, or you can access this on the CDFA resource website. So the application itself will be available starting tomorrow. So tomorrow morning, the application for both the regular tax credits and community economic development will be available on the grants management system tomorrow morning. After that, there will be outreach and technical assistance, which will be available from now through the deadline on March 8th. You'll receive instructions on how to set up a pre-app meeting, which Melissa is going to talk about, and you'll be getting additional information on that. On March 8th, as was already mentioned, the application is due at 4 p.m. We won't make exceptions after that, so it's really important that you are think about that ahead of time. Don't take a chance and submit your application, say at 3:55. You never know. I always say give yourself a little extra time. You may have some last minute questions, so the sooner you can plan for that, the better. Just please don't wait until the last minute, because you put all that work into it, and so we want to see you be able to submit that application. We'll be doing application reviews after we receive them from March through May. We'll be doing a threshold review, a financial review. We'll be reviewing the narrative, and then we will conduct either a virtual or probably on-site site visit. It'll depend on the number of applications we get in available time, but typically we would do an on-site visit as well. The award notifications will be made on the week of June 10th. So you have that process will run from March 8th through June. So the tax credit awards for this round, CDFA will be making tax credit awards for state fiscal years 2025 and 2026. As most organizations and tax credit donors operate on a calendar year from January to December, this is kind of an important distinction to take into account in terms of timing. The graphic depicts a typical year managing a CDFA tax credit award, and in this instance, we are showing you state fiscal year 2025. Those awarded tax credits in June will most likely have multi-year awards for state fiscal year 25 and 26. So imagine, as you're looking at this, that the fundraising cycle continues or repeats into the second year of your grant. So to summarize, in the last week in June of 2024, we will have a Tax Credit 101 training. And this is where we cover how to fundraise and manage your tax credit allocation. Information about your project and all current projects with credits available are placed on the CDFA website. CDFA also has an electronic pledge portal, so donors may easily make pledges online. There was a time where we had paper pledges, and it was a lot more work. Now a donor can just go in right onto our website and make the pledge easily. So from July 1st, 2024, the fundraising phase starts. At this point, you can collect pledges for tax credits allocated to your project. Businesses will choose a date or dates to make a payment on your state fiscal year 25 pledges up to June 30th, 2025. And also looking at the grant timeline, on March 31st, 2025, all pledges for state fiscal year 25 and tax credits are due on March 31st, 2025. And then by June 30th, 2025, as we mentioned, those are the deadlines where we need all funds from the donors for state fiscal year 25 pledges. Now, if your project also receives state fiscal year 26 credits, you just follow the same timeline we just talked about now, but it'll just start on July 1st, 2025 and go through to June 30th, 2026. So one more thing. If you remember on Tuesday, we said that pledge payments come to CDFA, who then makes disbursements to the project. Disbursements to your project are made under the terms outlined in your contract. There are a number of factors that must align for disbursements to be made for the project, including successful fundraising efforts across both years of your awards and the amount of funds available to your project. We understand some project timelines might not align perfectly with this process, and your project may need funds before they are available from CDFA. So we also have a bridge financing program available, which we'll talk a little bit about later. Now, again, this is kind of a review of the previous slide, just to talk about this again for the allocations. Depending on the size of your award, it will likely be broken out into fiscal years 2025 and 2026. And there are multiple factors that go into making that decision. We'll determine that split based on the amount specified in your application and the availability of tax credits. Because we are limited to $5 million per year in tax credit allocations, and if we don't use them, we don't get to utilize them, we carefully manage how the credits are allocated. So again, as this was mentioned in the previous slide, for state fiscal year 2025, pledges must be secured by March 31st, 2025, and all donations from those pledges are due by June 30th, 2025. For state fiscal year 2026, pledges must be secured by March 31st, 2026, and the donations from businesses are due by June 30th, 2026. If your project is awarded tax credits, we will dive into this information much more in detail during our Tax Credit 101 workshop in June. So again, if there are any questions at this point, I'd be happy to take them.
I don't see any questions at this time, George.
Oh, boy, I didn't think I was that clear, but okay, I'll take your word for it. So right now we're going to go into the Community Economic Development Capacity Building application, and Melissa is going to take over from here and take on this portion of the presentation. Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks, George. And if any questions do pop up as you think about them related to the previous sections or the current sections, please don't hesitate to drop them into that Q&A box. We will be pausing throughout to answer, and we'll also be sticking around at the end should other questions come up. So, all right, so let's dive in and briefly cover the capacity building application. So just a quick review. Capacity building is a pretty broad term and can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different organization types. This slide lists out some of those types of development that capacity building can support. But we understand that, again, this is a really broad category. And generally, capacity building strengthens skills, abilities, and processes for nonprofit organizations to thrive and be resilient and sustainable. So capacity building can really help successfully fulfill an nonprofit organization's mission and help strengthen the economy and the local community. So again, here are some examples of what that might mean, but we're certainly encouraging you to bring any additional or emerging capacity building needs that you might have to us for discussion. So if you don't see capacity building topic that you might need here, listed here, please, we encourage you to have a pre-application meeting with us and bring that need forward as we're more than happy to discuss. Just to review some of the funding priorities for the Community Economic Development Capacity Building Program, we're really looking to focus our funding on efforts that are collaborating in community development, initiatives that are led by or being focused on priority population, those strategies that are really focused on place-based community economic development, innovative models or initiatives that might be replicable across the state, as well as efforts that engage the community really broadly and deeply. So ensuring that those projects are really meeting local community needs and that the community's been engaged in those conversations. So I'm just going to shift now and review each of the application components briefly with you all to give you an understanding of what to anticipate should you look to pursue a capacity building application. I'll pause for a moment. I did drop in the chat a link to that application and program guide. And again, Appendix A, if you'd like to follow along, all of this information is outlined within that guide. So first off, pretty basic application or information that we'll need is going to include your organization and your address. We'll be looking for your project title. Please keep it short, as well as details on your funding request. So capacity building will support a maximum request of $150,000 over 2 years, and that's up to $75,000 per year. Please note again, as we discussed earlier this week, that a portion, 20% of the tax credits award, is set aside to support the administration of the program, as well as CDFA's statewide investments, technical assistance, data collection, research, and general operations. So your application will calculate the amount that you need to raise based on your project budget. So for example, you're going to place the amount of funds that you're requesting from CDFA in the left column, and GMS will automatically calculate the amount of tax credit donations you need to raise for your project. We also understand that raising these tax credits can be a challenge for those who are seeking capacity building resources. So CDFA will fundraise for applicants within their first year to help support you through that first year of your capacity building programming. Applicants will be responsible if you're awarded for fundraising in the second year. But we certainly are here to help support you through that process, and we'll provide you some support in the transition of the fundraising efforts. Diving into some of the narrative requirements. So again, we do encourage you to have your narratives in a Word document so that you can easily save that content if it doesn't easily transfer into our grants management system. And that 2,000 character limit translates to about 320 words, or maybe about a half a page of content. So you don't feel like you need to fill out the full character count, but just as a reference, we encourage you to be clear and concise with your narrative responses. So first off, we're really going to be looking for some information on your project, including details about how that project came to fruition, the partners involved, and the proposed timeline. Really, this is the executive summary. So also, the next narrative question is really going to focus on the organizational capacity that you're looking to build. If it was one of those types that was listed in that other slide, describe that in more detail. If it's a newer or emerging capacity need, we encourage you to provide us more information on how that came about. How do you know that this capacity building is needed? And how will these efforts increase your ability to meet your mission and address local needs? And then again, we'll ask you to really focus on what your community economic development challenge, what your proposed project will address. Additional narrative requirements, we'll really be looking for you to explain how your proposal will address priority areas, including collaboration and benefiting priority populations or places. And then we'd ask you to really explain what the long-term value of your project will be to the local community. So what is the lasting impact that these capacity building efforts will leave in your community? And you'll see, as a reminder, those funding priorities in that red box to the side of this slide. And when you're thinking about the long-term value, we really encourage you to also think about community systems and how that might fit into kind of the broader ecosystem of supports within your community. Additional narratives will include the opportunity for you to explain how this one-time infusion of resources will really help you advance your project or your organization in serving its mission. And then let us know, define to us how you know that this proposal is successful. So what does success look like for you as an organization and for your local community, should you have access to these resources to build out your capacity in the way that you're describing? There's also a budget section to the application, and this will provide you the opportunity to really line by line outline what your budget is, including staff costs, training, supplies, travel, marketing, professional fees, and there's another section should you have other needs, GMS is going to prompt you with these categories, and you may add additional ones. You'll also be asked to share other funding sources that you might have access to support your capacity building efforts. And there is an opportunity to provide attachments if necessary, if there are other documents related to your budget or fundraising that would be helpful for us to consider as we review your application. Additional attachments that will require, and George will cover some of these in more detail during the tax credit portion of the discussion, as there are similar requirements within that program. But you'll need to include your organizational documents like articles of incorporation, bylaws, proof of good standing, a list of your board of directors. Also, if you have any letters from potential business donors that you might have secured, or letters of support from other community organizations or community members, we encourage you to include those. Again, CDFA will be fundraising for all awardees within the first year of your award. But if you would like to fundraise on your own or have secured business donor support for your project, that's certainly something that you can indicate in your application. We'll also be looking for your organization's operating budget as well as financial statements. And again, George will cover what those financial requirements are in more detail during the tax credit portion of the presentation. So next steps to consider. Again, we reviewed grant writing assistance and definitely encourage those organizations that have a need for these resources to review that documentation. We review the program guidance and secure a pre-application meeting with CDFA staff. You'll have the opportunity to indicate that you're interested in capacity building specifically, or grant writing specifically as well, when you're scheduling those pre-application meetings. So we certainly encourage you to do so, so we can ensure that you're connected to the appropriate staff member to talk about your capacity building needs. And just a reminder of those key dates: the application will be available tomorrow and due by March 8th at 4 o'clock in our grants management system. And award notifications will be the week of June 10th. So all the same timeline as our tax credit program.
Well, Melissa, there are several questions, though I think they might be better served, when George kind of goes through a little of his presentation, and because they apply to both programs, and then he can answer them then, I think.
Perfect. So if that's the case, I do see one about a potential need for both capacity building and tax credits. And there is an opportunity to apply for both. And that would definitely be a really good conversation to be having in your pre-application meeting. And when you do select a pre-application meeting, you can select that you're interested in both programs. So that is an option for you as well. All right, great. Without further ado, George, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Melissa. Right now, we're going to talk about the regular tax credit application. You just heard about the Community Economic Development Capacity Program, and this presentation will cover the tax credit application, our regular tax credit program. So we'll go through that, and one step at a time. Some of the things that you hear will be things you've already heard in the outline for the CED application, so we'll try and go through those parts quickly. And so, again, just to note that the application will need to be completed on the CDFA Grants Management System. We do have the instructions for registering on the Grants Management System, which can be found in our CDFA Resource Hub. You'll be getting information as a follow-up to do that as well. So why don't we go through the key components one at a time? And the first is the application information. This is a This section is general information, and it's the same as we spoke about in the previous section. You have an application title. Again, keep it short. We want to know who the primary contact is for the application. And that would be the person, who do we call when we have questions? And again, that oftentimes may be the grant writer or someone from your organization. But if we have questions about the application, who is going to be that primary contact? That person who will be the primary contact will need to register on the grants management system. The organization, who will be the organization that you are associated with on GMS? Again, your organization may already be on the grants management system. If not, you'll have to register your organization on the grants management system. There'll also be room for additional contacts. And again, there may be other people affiliated with the project that that may be important to speak to, say, for example, your CEO. So we'll want to know about those contacts as well. Then there'll be the statutory eligibility section, and this will be a drop-down list. Typically, we see that most applicants are nonprofit organizations involved in community development. Oftentimes, we also see municipal government applicants, but any type of organization listed here is eligible to apply. We'll be asking for applicant information, describe the mission of your organization, its structure type, and governance. Applicants can range from large, sophisticated organizations with a long track record to small, newly formed nonprofits that could be staffed by volunteers and maybe utilizing a fiscal sponsor, and pretty much everything in between. So we see all kinds of organizations, and to be helpful to us, please give us an outline of your organization. And this will help us determine whether we need to provide additional technical assistance during the application process. And then you'll go to the project type, and again, it's a drop-down list on the grants management system. You're going to say it's either going to be housing or community economic development or both. Again, most of the applications we see are going to be community economic development applications, although it could be any one of those. Then, as we mentioned in the previous presentation, you're going to make your tax credit request. We are asking you here to break this down by fiscal year, the amount of tax credits your organization needs to be successful. Funds are limited, so your organization is chosen to the organization that's chosen to receive funds. We can't guarantee that we'll be able to accommodate your request exactly, but it helps us make allocation decisions. We ask that applicants only request the amount of tax credits really needed for your project. We ask that you don't inflate your requests. Just be as honest as possible about the funds you think you're going to need for tax credits, and it's something that you'll see later that comes up in the budgeting that you'll do. So again, be accurate and based on the timing of your project. So again, this application round is for state fiscal year 25 and 26 credits. The state fiscal year 25 starts on July 1st, 2024. And what you'll do is you'll place the amount of funds you are requesting from CDFA in the left column, and the grants management system will automatically calculate the amount of tax credit donations you'll need to raise. And again, that's something Melissa went through in the previous presentation on community economic development. And also, it should be there. We would like a total project cost. The total project cost is something that you can take from your sources and uses that you'll be filling out later in the application. Now, as far as statutory eligibility, first, there will be threshold attachments. This is backup documentation to confirm that your organization is eligible. Some of the fields here may require an attachment. What we will be looking for are your articles of incorporation and your bylaws. If you're a 501c3 or just a 501c organization, we'd like to see your IRS determination letter. We'd want to see your certificate of good standing with the New Hampshire Secretary of State's office. That is something that, unless you're a municipality, you will need to have a certificate of good standing with the Secretary of State's office. There's a link right here on the presentation on how to go there and look to see that you're in good standing. Also, if you are registered with the New Hampshire Department of Justice Charitable Trust Division, we'd like to see that you're in good standing there as well. Finally, we don't ask for this in this section, but if you're a fiscal sponsor, we can work with fiscal sponsors. We have plenty of times in the past. We have fiscal sponsor guidance. Make sure you review that. And if your organization that's applying does have a fiscal sponsor, we're going to want to see your agreement with the fiscal sponsor, and that's something you can attach later. So again, It's perfectly fine if you're if you have a fiscal sponsor and you can apply. Then we'll go into the project and readiness information. Here's where you'll put your project name. Again, keep it short and keep it simple. If it's one of those really long names, we'll change it. And you may not like the way we make the name of your project. So try to keep it short so we don't have to rename it for you. Project address, where's your project going to be located? And then we'd like you to provide an executive summary, briefly and concisely describe the project you are seeking tax credits for, why you are seeking them, the problem you are addressing, and the outcome you are expecting. And then the project description, if the project involves acquisition, construction, or renovation of real estate, describe the property, its ownership structure, and the status of site control. Again, site control is really important. You may be wanting to do work on a building that you're purchasing, and you may not have purchased it yet. So we want to know what the status of site control is, when you'll be purchasing that building, and it all fits into the timeline of your project. Are you doing leasehold improvements? That is also important. So if you're doing leasehold improvements, we're going to want to need to know about that and what your lease is for. List any mortgages or deed restrictions that are on the property. Is there anything that would prevent CDFA from putting a use restricting mortgage lien on the property? We'll also need, if appropriate, a recent property appraisal, planning and zoning approvals, an asset management plan, which is a projection of future capital improvements that will be put in the project information and public benefits attachment component of the application. So there's a lot of upfront information that you'll put into the project. You might not need every single thing here. I've gone through just about all of them, but you'll need to put in the ones appropriate to your project. Now, more in terms of project readiness and information, CDFA places a 10-year performance lien on any property purchased, developed, or renovated with tax credit funds. This simply means that CDFA seeks to have the option of having a prorated portion of tax credit funds returned if there is a sale or change of use in the property during a 10-year period. If you cannot accept the lien, we will ask you to suggest an alternative. CDFA reserves the right to reject any offer it determines insufficient to ensure performance security. In terms of that, we generally will not dispense tax credit funds without the appropriate security in place for your project. If you have any questions about this, we can work with you on this, and if it's something you need to talk about at the tax credit pre-app meeting, we're happy to discuss this with you. You'll also want a project timeline and readiness. When will your project begin? When will it be complete? If your project includes construction, please discuss the status of your architectural and engineering plans and your cost estimates. Again, what permits, approvals, agreements, or other requirements are necessary to complete the project. Have all these approvals been secured? If not, describe your strategy and timeline for securing them. We also have a CDFA energy policy, which there's a link for in the application and program guide. Indicate whether you have completed an energy audit for retrofit projects or an energy design charrette for new construction in the past 3 years, or your plans for completion of these. Briefly describe any communication with the relevant utility regarding potential energy incentives. Indicate if your project plans will meet the recommendations from the energy policy. And again, this is just a short part of this. Scott is going to be presenting later, and he will get into more detail on CDFA's energy policy. I gather there are some questions, Melissa.
We do have some questions, George. Thought it might be a good time to just pause before we get too far, much further along. So first one is relevant to the lien. After 10 years, how is that lien removed or rectified between CDFA and the organization?
You just request us to remove it, and we'll remove it.
Got it. On the application, do we specify the state fiscal year resources that we want, or does CDFA decide how to divide the award?
Ultimately, CDFA will decide how to divide the award. However, put it in your application in the format that you need it. We'll do our best to accommodate you, but there's a lot of factors that go into it. Based on the timing of when you're going to be doing construction, based on the tax credits we have available, and based on fundraising capability. So there's quite a bit that goes into it, but by all means, make your request in terms of when you think you'll need the funds. And if we need to, we can make adjustments from there.
And each application will have a column for each of the state fiscal years. So it already automatically each application will identify which fiscal year. And so you'll just insert the appropriate amount of your request in each of those columns. We're not quite at the right timing. Would it be smart to submit in March of 2024 and look forward to funding should we get awarded, or in March 2025? So I think this is a readiness question. If they're not quite sure if they're ready or not, I think we would probably still encourage a pre-application meeting if they have a project in mind.
For sure. Because
that's helpful for us to even just understand the potential for a project, and we can help you throughout the next year or so make preparations if you're not ready for this round.
Yep.
How much does the nonprofit have to raise for either a capacity building grant or a tax credit grant? Is it 1-for-1?
Not sure.
I don't know if this is asking about match or asking about
I mean, in terms of there's not a match requirement. Certainly you will need, once tax credits are considered filling in a gap in your project. So for whatever amount of tax credits you ask for, we would expect you would have the rest of the funds to finish, to be able to complete the project. So there is not a formal match requirement. We understand that some nonprofits, have more access to other funds than others. A housing project that has access to low-income housing tax credits is a lot different than a homeless shelter who may not have access to other sources of funding. So we take that into account when we review. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
I think that does. If it was a match question, could you give a math example? Like if they want X amount of tax credit, you would need to fundraise that.
If in terms of fundraising, I know it was mentioned in the CED presentation that CDFA does the fundraising for the first year. In the regular tax credit program, you would be responsible to do all of the fundraising.
All right, and then a question: we have partners secured for our project as part of our strategic plan. I'm wondering if CDFA is able to help pair project partners or provide guidance on how to make project and partner group more impactful. As an example, if we're planning for childcare on our campus and another group planning for something similar, do you match up projects and partners?
We do our best in terms of what we're able to do. We encourage collaboration, and if in fact we know of someone who would be complementary to what you're doing, we would try and put you in contact with them. Again, that might be a better discussion during a pre-app meeting.
But if we can make connections, and that's what you're looking for, we're certainly happy to do that. A confirmation: the lien is recorded with the Registry of Deeds for the county.
Okay. Correct.
And then similar to that other collaboration, if you're working on an interagency project, do all agencies need to be part of the application process, or should one agency take a lead role?
One agency should take the lead role in the application, and obviously in the application and in your narratives, talk about the roles of your partners.
Great. And then just a clarification, when we say fundraising, does this mean finding businesses who want to buy the tax credits?
Yes, it does. And it's the most fun part of the project, we promise. We do help you with that process. If you receive tax credits, within 2 weeks after the award is made, we run a workshop called Tax Credit 101. That'll probably come up later in the presentation, but just to say now, it's designed to help you sell your tax credits, and we give you a lot of information on how to do that, and actually have folks there at the workshop who have actually sold tax credits before and donors who have purchased tax credits. So we try to make you as prepared as possible before you go out to sell the tax credits.
Excellent. So that sums it up for now, George. Great questions. Please keep them coming as we will be continuing to pause throughout. So I'll advance you to the next slide.
All right. Right now we're talking about public benefit and purpose. This is section 5. The bulk of your narrative information will be in this section. This is where you're going to make your case that your project fits the tax credit program mission of providing a public benefit for a public purpose within the context of the program objectives and priorities that we spoke about earlier. So first, we're going to talk about the community development issue. Describe the community development issue your organization will address. Is your project in a CDFA priority area, as we talked about earlier? Please use the community progress indicators to provide context for your discussion. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later. Does the data support the community development issue you are addressing? If it doesn't, why do you think that may be? So again, we'll be talking a little more about community progress indicators in just a minute, but that's something that will help you write this. I would say, as you're doing this section and the next one, go back to your application and program guide to review the funding priorities and definitions. See if they're applicable to your community development issue you're addressing to provide supporting information in your narrative. So the next question will be your proposed community development solution. You've talked about your community development issue. Now we want you to talk about your community development solution. How does your project address or solve the community development issue described above? And why is your organization qualified to address it? How does this project fit within the community's broader strategy or plan? And how does your project address community needs? So again, we want to talk about the issue you're addressing and your solution to that issue. There are in the grants management system, again, it was mentioned before, there are character limits. If you can, we'd like you to stay within the character limits provided. However, if you need to provide extra information that's important to the issue, you can certainly put it on a document and attach it if you need to provide additional information. So at this point, we're going to talk a little bit about community progress indicators, which you're going to use for your application to support your application. CDFA is placing a greater emphasis on data gathering and analysis with the ultimate goal of targeting our resources to places with the greatest need and improving the overall being of all communities across the Granite State. Since 2019, we've worked with the New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute to identify data and information that helps to quantify socioeconomic and community strengths, issues, and challenges. The result of that work is a set of community progress indicators, which fall into 3 broad categories. They are basic human needs, access to opportunity, and community sustainability and vibrancy. The first set of indicators was released in January 2020 using data from 2019. In the summer and fall, we work with the Fiscal Policy Institute staff to update the indicators with new data from the current year. We post the updated community progress indicators on our website in December for use in the following year. The complete data set for the most current year is now posted on our website. You can use these data as you put together the case statement for your project. So here's a sample for 2023. Data for all 13 indicators are compiled for each New Hampshire municipality and for each of the state's 10 counties. You can access these data in several ways. You can download an Excel spreadsheet, which can be sorted in a variety of ways. This is an excerpt from the 2023 indicators showing data for communities in Belknap County. Municipalities are listed in the far left column, so you can just read across the table, and you can see an indicator value for each community, starting with population. So you can use this data to inform community decision-making and investments, and you can see how your community compares to other communities nearby within your county or in other parts of the state. So what we'll do at this point is take a look at a particular community. So what you've done here is highlight the city of Laconia, which is circled in red. As you read across from left to right, you can see that Laconia is the most populous municipality in Belknap County, and it has the highest rate of enrollment in the SNAP program, also known as food stamps, and free and reduced school meal programs. Across Belknap County, families spend 27% more than the benchmark of 30% of household income on housing costs. For this indicator, if a family spent a total of 30% of its income on housing, the indicator would show 100%, and more than 8% of people don't have health insurance. So household income is statistically lower than the statewide median income, which along with SNAP and school meal enrollment can be good indicators of how many people are financially challenged. It's a pretty good indicator of the town's ability to provide basic municipal services such as roads, schools, police, and fire and social services. To look at that, we want to look at taxable property per capita. In Laconia, property value is slightly higher than the statewide median, but lower than most of the other towns in the county. So with the community progress indicators, anyone can create a snapshot of circumstances in their own town or city. For the tax credit program, you may be able to use the data for your city or town as empirical evidence of community need for your proposed project. So as we noted earlier, community need is a key measure in allocating tax credits. So you can really use this data to support your case for community need. We've also dedicated a web page for all our data resources. And if you go to our website to our page for data resources, at the top of the page, you'll see a color-shaded map of New Hampshire. This is a geo-referenced interactive display of community progress indicators, which is created by PolicyMap. All the data shown in the previous slide can be viewed on this map. The web page has detailed instructions about how to navigate the map. Below the map, there is a link to a short video describing our data initiative, more about community progress indicators, and a link to the current Excel spreadsheet that you were shown earlier. You can also download the indicators that we have previously up to our most current data, and it's a great resource for looking at trends over time. So here's a project example. In 2001, CDFA received an application from Sullivan County for matching funds to support a lead paint abatement and healthy homes program. The application used community progress indicators to create a powerful picture of need. By looking at the town and county data, the application pointed out not only significant challenges at the county level, but also stark differences among the various municipalities, with Claremont, Newport, and Charlestown, which together represent 60% of the county's population, at one end of the spectrum, and affluent communities like Sunapee, Grantham, and Plainfield on the other. So the statewide average for SNAP enrollment was 4.5% for Claremont, Newport, and Charlestown. The combined average was 13.1%, nearly triple the state average. The statewide average for free and reduced priced meals was 27% for Newport, Claremont, and Charlestown, and the combined average was 51%, nearly double the state's number. A review of taxable property value revealed that these three towns were in the bottom 9 towns in the entire state, compared with the 230 other municipalities. So New Hampshire municipalities averaged about 20% of residents reporting annual income over $100,000. For Claremont, Newport, and Charlestown, that figure was 10%, half of the rate of the state rate. So they used county level data effectively as well. Weekly job wages in Sullivan County were 13% below the New Hampshire average. And finally, migration patterns supported the notion that people leaving Sullivan County for a better opportunity were available elsewhere. New Hampshire's average change was 1.7% growth, while Sullivan County's average was negative 0.4%. So they were really able to use this data to demonstrate the need for Sullivan County when they put in the application. The case statement concluded this way: although this lead paint abatement and healthy homes program will not fix all of Sullivan County's problems, The quality of housing stock is a good proxy that represents the poverty, public health, education, and vibrancy challenge faced there and documented by data. Preventing childhood-lead poisoning will reduce future numbers of permanently disabled adults who will be more likely to need SNAP or whose children will qualify for free reduced school meals. The economic activity spurred by this grant could elevate a small number of people out of poverty by providing free training to become certified lead abatement workers and earn better wages while developing career skills. The broad effort to improve our housing stock should serve as the proverbial rising tide that will lift all boats. And CDFA did fund Sullivan County's request, and they're still in this process now of finishing up the program. And it has provided job training for people and provided new skills as well as helping reducing lead hazards in the county. So if at this point, I'd like to pause to see if there are any questions about community progress indicators or any other data.
Certainly. So we have a question here that's asking whether we give certain weight to community progress indicators, environmental or energy considerations, partnerships, collaborations, priority populations, or are all of these items taken together and considered as a whole? So it seems like maybe the variety of the project elements that we've been going through so far, how do we kind of weigh the different areas that we're looking at for an application?
I mean, each project is really unique, and yes, we do have priority areas, and it would depend on how many applications we have. That doesn't mean that if you don't specifically address a priority area that you shouldn't submit an application. There are different priorities, and you have the opportunity to make your own statement as to those priorities.
But we don't have like specific weights for like an energy component or priority population or collaborations. We're looking at the applicant and the project as a whole,
Yep.
and some of all of those parts. So there's no specific weights. There's a couple questions about tax credits, whether individual donors can purchase tax credits, and I'd say no, like citizens of New Hampshire, as individual
Unless they
donors.
pay the business profits tax or the business enterprise tax.
Yep. And then another question, just about whether tax donors can stack tax credits on top of typical nonprofit tax deductions, so they have an increased incentive to support. So I'd say they could potentially, the tax credit donation could be eligible for the federal charitable deduction, but that would be a really specific question for a business to explore with their.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that at the overview workshop. As far as it being eligible for a federal deduction, in general, it's a 75% tax credit. So the 25% that is not eligible for the state tax credit may be eligible for federal charitable deduction.
Thanks, George. That's all the questions for now.
All right, and on our next slide, in addition to the custom map made for CDFA, Policy Map provides free access to literally thousands of data sources grouped into categories: demographics, income and spending, housing, lending, quality of life, economy, education, health, federal guidelines, and analytics. So this screenshot shows eligible census tracts for federal new markets tax credits, which are in blue. You simply need to go to www.policymap.com and start exploring this great source for information by state, county, city, town, or zip code, or even the census tract. Right now, we'll provide you an example of a good use of data to support a tax credit application. The Southeast Land Trust conserves and stewards land for the benefit of people and nature in New Hampshire. They serve 52 towns and cities in Rockingham and Stratford counties, and they've conserved tens of thousands of acres since 1980, including nature preserves, hiking trails, farmland, and scenic vistas. CDFA provided $450,000 in tax credits for the Southeast Land Trust to establish the Center for People and Nature at Burley Farms in Epping. The project was completed in 2023 and includes the construction of a 7,000 square foot energy efficient building and the rehabilitation of a historic 1785 farmhouse. The work will result in the creation of a working farm, two-bedroom workforce housing units, the creation of 2 jobs, employment for environmental educators, provide nature-based education via the Southeast Land Trust, and partner-driven programs. This will also include offices for SILT and at least 2 other nonprofit partners, a public trail system, and a community meeting room, and a farmer's market. The project will also include net zero energy consumption driven by solar power and energy efficient design. The Southeast Land Trust estimates that the farm will touch more than 7,000 individuals annually. So the Southeast Land Trust actively sought community input and support to create a vision and plan for the Center for People and Nature, starting utilizing focus groups held throughout their service territory, annual meetings and interviews with community leaders, the local school district, parks and recreation departments, the UNH Cooperative Extension, 4-H agricultural experts, and local businesses who saw this as an economic driver. The Southeast Land Trust also referenced the town of Epping's vision statement. So the main point here is that the Southeast Land Trust spent a great deal of time and energy to educate and receive input from a broad spectrum of community members to inform the development of the project. The input resulted in a project that served local needs and resulted in broad local support, which also enhanced their fundraising efforts. So again, we've talked about collaboration being a priority. This is a great example of collaboration. So again, we will be asking you about your community input and support. Provide evidence of community input and support for your project. What process was used to bring community members together to design this project? Provide the names and roles of any other organizations that will be involved in the completion of this project and provision of the public benefit it will provide. And again, the previous slide about the Southeast Land Trust was a perfect example of attaining community support for their project and gathering input. We'd also like you to talk about outcome measures. What are the goals and measurable outcomes of your project? What is your methodology for tracking them? How will success be measured or evaluated? Where applicable, enter the totals of the proposed project or program outcomes. And there's some examples there on your slides. If you're doing a housing project, we want to know how many housing units that you're constructing, the types of housing units: family, senior, transitional, supportive, permanent housing. There's a drop-down list you can choose from there. Is there a housing affordability period if you're building affordable housing? How many people are you serving? How many of them are low to moderate income? Are you creating jobs? We'd like to know about that. Or are you retaining jobs? The total number of square feet that you're developing for your commercial or community facility space. So we want to know what you think will make this project a success. It doesn't necessarily have to be numbers-based, but what impact in your community will make this a success in your eyes? Remember, or a reminder, it's important to be realistic about the outcomes and your project goals. And again, this is something we'll need to look at. It's an important part of your project, and it's something that you'll report on during the course of the project. And if the goals aren't what you've seen here, you can certainly propose additional goals. One example of a project that was very successful at showing at writing out their goals was the Mountaintop Music Center in Conway. They're a 501c3 nonprofit organization which has been offering top quality music education programs and a variety of concerts in the greater Mount Washington Valley since 1996. At the time, they were growing but lacked the space to provide instruction. So in addition to securing much needed expanded instruction, rehearsal, and performance space for itself, as well as ensuring access to community groups for much needed multifunction performance space, Mountaintop will also realize several specific measurable outcomes. The successful renovation and revitalization of the historic but vacant Baldock block will enable Mountaintop to remain in Conway Village and retain 13 full and part-time positions, currently representing an annual payroll of $223,000. In the application, Mountaintop forecasted 12% growth during the ensuing year through increased enrollment. The increased enrollment is what necessitates the decrease of staffing, which they increased by 1.9 full-time equivalent jobs. With the return of the renovated ground floor commercial space, Mountaintop anticipated leasing the 4 distinct spaces, which would create between 8 and 10 jobs in Conway Village. This job creation estimate is based on preliminary discussions with more than 24 prospective tenants, and they were able to support that estimate. Mountaintop anticipates one of the commercial spaces will be used for a space that will generate meals tax revenue for the state of New Hampshire. The restoration of commercial space will also create a significant revenue stream for Mountaintop that currently does not exist. It is anticipated using an 80% occupancy rate. The commercial space will generate gross income of $33,000 annually. This income stream will cover most, if not all, of the overhead costs associated with the entire 15,000 square foot property, enabling ongoing fundraising activity to focus directly on Mountaintop's core mission. The restoration of the valuable commercial space in Conway Village will generate annual local property taxes of approximately $4,500 to the town of Conway in the following the completion of the project. The benefit to the local economy of approximately $2 million was based in the project budget. The bottom line is that they put a lot of thought and they did due diligence before proceeding with this project. Each of the outcomes delineated above is easily measured directly through Mountaintop's financial statements, or as in the case of jobs created through the renovation of commercial space and direct discussion with tenants. So there really was a multi-layer impact on this project. This project has been completed, and if you've driven through Center Conway, you can take a look at the Majestic Theater. That was an empty space at one time, so it was a very important economic driver there. They're now located downtown. All the spaces are occupied. They have provided the jobs, and they're doing the education content, and they're providing shows. So it's been a real success story, and they were really able to describe it for us in the application. They described what they thought was going to happen, and that's what happened, and they had the data to back it up. So I think that's a great project example. Now, there's also room for attachments. I won't go through each one, just to say that one of those attachments will be looking for an asset management plan, which is a plan for long-term sustainability of the project asset with a view to operating, maintaining, and renewing the assets or infrastructure in the most cost-effective manner possible. Address how the implementation of your project will affect the operating and maintenance costs. We encourage you to use photos and renderings for presentation. Please set a realistic timeline. And as you look in there, again, evidence of site control, property appraisal, if applicable, lots of things that we talked about earlier as threshold requirements, and this is where you would attach them. Construction or implementation schedule. We like to see letters, news articles, and studies to support your project if you have it. Your project may have historical benefit. If that's the case, please provide that historical information. If you have an emphasis on energy efficiency and clean energy, this is where to put it. The documentation that Scott will talk about that we'll be looking for can be provided here in this section. So one more project example. I think it's one thing to talk about is project capacity and how important that is for you to be able to complete your project. The Belknap Mills Society Industrial Evolution 2019. The Belknap Mills Society is a 501c3 nonprofit whose mission is to preserve the Belknap Mill. The Belknap Mill is a unique historic gathering place, and it celebrates the Lakes region cultural heritage through arts, education, and civic engagement. The project will preserve and renovate the Belknap Mill in Laconia and support downtown revitalization taking place within the community. It will strengthen the city's creative economy and provide increased access to a vital community resource. They first submitted their application in 2017, and it was not approved by CDFA primarily due to readiness in relation to fundraising progress towards their goal, as well as a lack of organizational leadership. So as CDFA, we met with representatives from the Belknap Mill, and over the years, they addressed those areas that needed strengthening. Among things, raising additional funds for renovations and establishing a paid executive director position, which gave the director time to develop and implement comprehensive programming that will be a mainstay of ongoing financial stability for the Belknap Mill. They also had 7 businesses that committed to purchasing a specific amount of tax credits for $240,000, which they didn't have the first time. So they had promise, but they needed to build capacity to give CDFA confidence that they could complete the project. Ultimately, they received a gross award of $390,000. So now we see the Belknap Mill and also the Colonial Theater, which is another downtown Laconia project supported by tax credits, which are collaborating on programming and how to best serve their community needs. So this has all been, very successful project. And sometimes you come in, we like to look at your capacity, and even if you weren't necessarily funded the first time, we always invite projects to come back again. There's another example in Claremont where it took them 3 tries before they were funded. So, even if you're not totally sure, we encourage you to work with us, and we'll work with you. We do want to see you be successful. So we'd like to now go into the financial finance and development capacity information in terms of why you need tax credit funds. Why does your project need tax credit funds? Are you pursuing other sources of financing? If so, what other sources are you pursuing, and what is the current status? We will ask you about your history with CDFA. If you have a history with CDFA, who funded projects before, include the program, the amount of the grant or loan, and the current status. So you may have received tax credits before, or perhaps you've received community development block grant funds, or funds through our clean energy finance program. So just if you have received other funds from CDFA, please make note of that here. Are there other public or private investments? Has your organization received or administered grant funds or loans from other sources in the past 5 years? If so, please describe. And again, that's to help us determine capacity. Project implementation. Describe your organization's current staff and capacity to carry out the implementation of your proposed project. What will the responsibilities be? And then finally, your fundraising plan. We would like a project-specific fundraising plan. What is your plan for obtaining tax credit commitments? Have any business donors expressed interest in purchasing CDFA tax credits from you if you are awarded? Does your organization have the capacity to raise tax credits from businesses outside your region? If you are hiring a consultant, how much have you budgeted to do that? Again, we'd like to get an idea of what your fundraising plan is. Again, if you're awarded funds, that's something we'll be talking about in Tax Credit 101, but if you can provide any of these details in advance, that will be a help to your application. So every applicant must submit several financial documents. So before we dive into specifics, let's pause for a brief poll to get a better understanding of the various sizes of organizations we have with us this morning. We need to know, so do you want to, Melissa, would you like to do a poll? I saw this here in my notes and I couldn't remember whether we wanted to actually do a poll or not.
Hi, George. We're not going to do the poll at this time, just also noting that it's about 11:20 and we have a number of slides to get through. So I am going to probably pause on questions until the end at this time, and let's roll through the remainder of our slides.
Okay, thank you. So we'll need to know the start and end dates of your organization's fiscal year. Some use a calendar year, others go from July 1 through June 30th of the following calendar year. Others have different dates. This helps us understand your financial situation and the context for other financial documents. Each organization requesting tax credit funds submits several operating budgets for the entire organization and not just the tax credit project itself. We're going to want to see the annual operating budget and a budget to actual report for the most recent completed fiscal year. If you have a proposed operating budget for your next fiscal year, it's helpful to include that as well. Every nonprofit organization with an annual operating budget of greater than $25,000 must submit an annual report to the New Hampshire Secretary of State's office. The annual report must include a financial statement. There are different types of financial statements that the state requires depending on the size of your organization. Our requirements are the same as the Secretary of State. If your organization has an annual operating budget of more than $1 million, submit your audited financial statement. If your organization has an operating budget of $500,000 to $1 million, submit at least a review financial statement. Finally, if your organization has an operating budget of less than $500,000 and you do not have an independently prepared financial statement, submit your IRS Form 990 from your most recent completed fiscal year. We also require management prepared financial statements for the current fiscal year, including your year-to-date balance sheet, profit and loss, and cash flow statements. These three documents are generally prepared by your CFO, controller, or finance committee chair, or some other finance person. These documents should be for the end of the fiscal period on or after December 31st, which gives us information about your organization's current financial health. The application does require a number of attachments. We need a list of your current board members and their affiliations. If you're able to secure commitments from prospective business donors before you apply, you can include letters of interest or support from those donors. We usually don't expect that you have a specific amount that the donor will be willing to commit to. It's usually too early in the process for them to know, but they certainly most of the time are willing to commit a letter that will state that they'd be willing to purchase tax credits if the project is awarded. Many projects use a variety of funding sources. If you are planning to use other funding in addition to CDF tax credits, we will need to know the status of other funding. Is it committed? Is it under review? Are you planning to apply? We also need to understand the timeline for other funds when you expect to have a final decision from other funders. If you already have funding committed, please include documentation of that commitment, such as the award letter or funding announcement for your project. And if you've conducted any kind of planning or feasibility study that documents the need for your project, please include it in your application. There are several other pieces to the financial puzzle. Financial status overview is a narrative section in the application, which enables you to provide some context behind the numbers. For example, you may have a planned deficit in your operating budget to enable you to invest in a new computer system, and you plan to raise funds over time to cover that cost. Or you may have a particularly large bequest that results in a very large operating surplus in 1 year, something that might look odd or generate a question if it weren't explained. The three financial tools listed are good indicators of the financial health of an organization and how the board is managing finances for long-term stability and growth. An operating reserve provides a cash buffer or other liquid assets that could be tapped in special circumstances. For instance, if you had lost a major contract or donor contribution. An endowment is another tool to generate operating revenue and provide a way for donors to create a legacy of support for your organization. A line of credit is a great tool to manage cash flow and to establish a positive working relationship with a local bank or credit union. A line of credit can provide a bridge to future revenue sources that you know are coming. For each of these tools, we ask you to tell us whether you have one, and if so, a bit more about it. How much, how it has been used, and plans for the future, and so on. Again, these tools are not required, but they do give us another way to better understand your organization's financial health. So you'll also have a project budget. We'll need to see detailed information about the budget for which you are requesting tax credits. This information is entered in the project budget section of the online grant application. The application includes a budget table called the sources and uses. You'll enter all different funding sources needed to complete the project, including proposed CDFA tax credits and all other confirmed or proposed funding from funders. Some refer to this as your project income. You will also enter a uses table for that funding as line items as in the budget table. Some refer to these as project expenses. Within the sources and uses table, you can ascribe specific uses or expenses to specific sources or income. For example, let's say your project is to renovate an existing building and you have a funder who is providing funding specifically for a new solar photovoltaic system on your roof. You would list the funder of one of those in one of those sources columns and the amount being provided for the solar system as a specific uses line item. The application asks for a budget narrative so that you can provide more detailed information and assumptions about each budget line in the sources and uses table. We strongly encourage applicants to create a project budget offline first using Excel. Make sure all the numbers add up. Be clear about the details related to each budget item. And once you have a final budget, you can enter the numbers into the sources and uses table in the application. Some applicants upload their detailed budget as an attachment. If you do this, be sure the uploaded budget is consistent with the sources and uses table in the application. To provide greater clarity about financial requirements, we created a financial documents explanation on our resource hub. You can go to our resource hub and type financial documents explanation into the search box. There is also a link to this document within the application in the grants management system. As always, if you have questions, please call or email us. Finally, you'll have a certification. This provides a place for you to upload any other relevant document not listed in another section. We require every organization to submit a certification from their authorized official that confirms several things. All the statements are true and accurate to the best of your knowledge. Your organization follows New Hampshire conflict of interest laws, and that you're acknowledging all information and documents created, accepted, or obtained by or on behalf of CDFA are subject to disclosure with RSA 91A. And again, that's just the certification at the end of the application, and that will be completed by an authorized signatory in your organization, most likely your CEO. So, and that will be it for the financial and certification sections. If there are any quick questions, we can take those, but I would say we'll wait for a little bit later. I know we're running behind, so we'll try to go through this quickly. I will just note here that CDFA has a tax credit bridge loan program. It might be something that you'll want to take advantage of in your project. I won't go into any detail on it at this point, just to say that it's available. If you have a pre-op meeting with us, we'd be glad to talk with you about it if that's of interest to you. So at this point, we'd like to do a very quick overview of CDFA's energy programs and policy, which will be done by Scott Maslansky, the Director of Clean Energy Finance.
Thank you very much, George. I know that time is running short, so I'm going to start by saying if some folks do have to leave, we do have an energy policy requirement, and if you have to leave, just make sure you're in touch with us if you go into a pre-application meeting to understand what that is, but I'm going to go through it now. So again, I'm Scott Maslansky. I'm Director of Clean Energy Finance, and CDFA provides several resources for applicants that are looking to improve their facilities' energy efficiency or to add renewable energy. We have small grants for energy-related studies, low-interest financing for energy projects, and our CDFA technical assistance to help you build a better project. The program I want to highlight that relates to the energy policy specifically is our Community Facilities Energy Assessment Program grant. And so that can cover up to 75% of the cost of an energy-related study for certain eligible projects in eligible communities. It is an easy application with approval in less than a week. And we're happy to talk to you about other potential resources for covering the cost of assessments too. I want to also note that these small grants could potentially support other studies that might relate to your application. It can go broader than energy efficiency if there's other preliminary studies. We also have clean energy financing that is available if you are looking to perhaps add, solar, but it's not in your budget for the project you're applying for, or if the grant can cover a portion of your costs for efficiency or solar, but you need financing to do the rest of an energy project. So related to the energy policy for this year, we want to make sure that our investments support projects in working to reduce your future operating costs, improve occupant comfort in buildings, and improve health and safety and the durability of your buildings. So we're trying to use this policy to help support that effort by requiring you to do some analysis on energy opportunities before you're fully, fully connected to your design to help inform that design. So the requirements for this policy are for applications that are proposing any physical alteration to an existing energy system in your building or your planned building. That would be your building envelope, mechanical systems, lighting, etc. Or for new construction, that would include additions or a gut rehab, for example. You will need for your application either to upload a completed energy assessment or a clear plan and time frame for completing the requirements. This has to be included in your tax credit application. In some cases, if your project does not impact an energy system, we have a waiver process. So in the next slide, you'll see an image of the policy, which is available on our website and through a link in the program guide. This shows the policy requirements. The two key requirements are highlighted. It's that you complete what's called a level 2 energy audit or an energy charrette, depending on the type of project that you're doing, and that you consult with your appropriate utility for potential implementation incentives. We want to make sure you're not leaving potential funding on the table. So again, a note on the app, it's the time frame for this is for your application, you do need to submit either a completed energy assessment report or this plan and time frame for meeting these requirements. A plan might include a proposal from or an email correspondence with an energy consultant that describes the type of assessment they would do and the estimated date of completion. I would just start this process fairly early. You don't necessarily have to do the assessment before the application. But if you are going to do the assessment after your application, you still need to make sure you're doing that well ahead of your, before you get too deep into your design work or your equipment's speccing, so that you have a chance to change that if it's warranted by the assessment. We also have a list of recommendations for energy-related projects. First, that you try to incorporate any recommendations that go above the current energy code into your final design or equipment purchases. Second, we encourage high-performance construction, so following guidelines, to meet any of the standards that might be for high-efficiency programming. Third, that projects commission any new energy system. Commissioning is where a third party comes in and verifies a system was installed correctly and trains building staff on how to best use and maintain the equipment. And there can be significant savings here that might be lost otherwise. Fourth, that the design team considers transitioning from any fossil fuel systems in the building to high efficiency electric systems. An example would be moving from an oil or propane boiler to an air source heat pump system. This would reduce site pollution, increase opportunities for renewable energy. This would support the building's heating and cooling through a solar system, for example. And last, that the project considers opportunities for solar or other renewable energy systems. And these recommendations, to some extent, will also relate to how we review applications. This slide is just to remind you we have some connections for you with your utility. If you're looking for those, we'll send those out to you for who to contact. And as far as next steps, make sure you review, if you have a design team, architect, engineer, etc., make sure you review this policy with them. Please reach out to us with any questions. Contact your utility. And again, you'll get a list of contacts, and it's in the policy. There's a link there. And talk to me if you want to reach out about our energy assessment grants. And if your project doesn't relate to energy in any way, you can submit a waiver request form. So thank you. Sorry to zip through that so fast, but just reach out with any questions. Oh, there is one more slide here. I won't go into detail, but there are a lot of other opportunities outside of CDFA to help with your implementation project. The federal tax credits that now apply to nonprofits. If you're doing solar, for example, you can actually get 30% off the cost of your project. And there's other incentives, rebates, etc. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk to you about those as well. And that'll do it. Unless there's any questions.
Hi, Scott. Not seeing any questions at this time, but definitely if folks have them, please continue to drop them in the Q&A box, as we will be sticking around for some time afterwards to run through those questions that have come in the last little while. George, did you want to close us out with some key dates and next steps? And I'll talk about pre-app meetings, and then we'll get to those questions.
All right. We've already spoken about the key dates, so I think the important thing is just, again, the application will be on the grants management system tomorrow, and it's due on March 8th. So those are the two key dates you need to know in the short term. Things to keep in mind also are if you're interested in the grant writing assistance program, please keep that in mind. You'll be receiving additional information where you can make an inquiry about that. And I think just to save time, why don't we move right ahead and talk about pre-application meetings. And Melissa, take it away.
So we'll be following up with the webinar recording, PowerPoint slides, as well as the relevant links that we've been talking about throughout this morning's program. That email will be coming to you tomorrow. On Monday, you can anticipate an email that has step-by-step instructions as far as how to schedule a pre-application meeting with CDFA. It's going to be through an online platform that hopefully you will find easy to use. Those meetings will begin starting next week, and we anticipate that they'll run through February 7th. So we're hoping to accomplish all of those pre-application meetings within the next 2 weeks or so, 2.5 weeks. When you are scheduling that pre-app meeting, there will be an opportunity for you to indicate if you're interested in grant writing assistance. There'll also be an opportunity for you to indicate whether which program you're interested in, as well as whether you have a specific project in mind or just looking to learn more about the program and have an anticipated project that you'd like to discuss and engage with CDFA on. There'll also be an opportunity, if you have this information available, it's helpful for you to provide it to staff in advance of your pre-app meeting, and you can do so right in that form as you're scheduling. But information on your project location, a brief description of your project, any details on a project or anticipated project timeline, as well as an anticipated budget and potential sources of funding. This information really provides CDFA staff with additional insight to what you'd be looking to discuss during that pre-application meeting, and helps us to prepare for that conversation. So if you do have that information available, we do appreciate you taking the time to fill out those additional optional boxes in that pre-app scheduling form. So now, thanks for those who are sticking around post 11:30. We'll start to answer some of the questions that we have. So one is asking whether CDFA has plans to increase the annual amount of tax credits that we have of $5 million. There have been efforts in the legislature to increase CDFA's allocation of tax credits. To clarify, we have $5 million in tax credit equity awarded through our organization, which is what you're accessing through the tax credit and capacity building program. But those efforts to date have not been successful, as we know that there are a number of tax credit programs in New Hampshire, but we do hope at some point in the future that the legislature will provide some additional resources, as they're very competitive and are utilized every year.
And we would appreciate your support.
Yes. When you awarded $750,000 to the Majestic Theater, was that over multiple years?
Generally, we our awards are over multiple years. It depends on the specific project, but certainly something of 750 of that amount would be awarded over 2 years.
Into an organization that demonstrates
The
significant
capacity.
capacity to fundraise.
Yep.
That.
Yep.
What kind of interest on the bridge loan, and can it be used in the place of a line of credit? And I understand the interest is variable, and it's not necessarily to supplement or to disperse a line of credit. And I see Scott popping on to maybe talk about that too.
Yeah, we so the as written, it's a 4% rate, but it's tied to the pledges that have already been secured. So as far as whether it can replace a line of credit, I'd say, depending on the timing, and that's something we can talk more about. Best to sort of reach out and we can get into more detail on that.
Great. And then is an energy audit required for the project or for all of our properties? So if they're a museum with several properties or several buildings.
It would typically be tied to wherever the project is taking place. If it's taking place in more than one building, then we can discuss where we have done that on more than one building and required that, but it depends on the situation. So typically just where the project is happening.
Great. Well, I'm not seeing any additional questions at this time. As I mentioned, we'll be following up with all of those materials over email by tomorrow, as well as those instructions on how to schedule pre-application meetings on Monday of next week. We thank you all for spending 2 mornings with us this week for many of you, and just appreciate your time and consideration of the tax credit and capacity building program. George, is there anything additional you want to share before we close today's webinar?
Just that we look forward to meeting with you. I know that seems like an awful lot, and we went through an awful lot in a short amount of time. It's not as intimidating as it might sound, and we encourage you to talk to us, and we're happy to help you through, in as much as we can. So we look forward to seeing your applications, and we look forward to talking to you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.